Okay. Well, we'll get going here, and I'm gonna hide everybody so nobody will be on there, but you can talk still. And anyway, the title of the program tonight is "The Heavens Proclaim the Glory of God," and we're going to look at the heavens basically, and the different things that are involved in things particularly that we can't see. That last month we talked about our soul we can't see, and that's earthly thing we can't see, but there's some heavenly things that we can't see either, but we're starting to see because some people are opening their eyes. And I think our main verse of our meeting every month is Timothy 6:20 through 21. O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings, in opposition of science falsely so called, which some professing have erred concerning the faith. Grace be with thee. Amen. So don't fall for the what they call science. And this is our theme. Christians don't deny science, they deny bad science. It's not religion versus science, but good science versus bad science. Christians don't deny the evidence, they deny the atheist interpretation of the evidence. So that's important. And tonight, our verse is Psalm 19, 1 and 2. This is part of the two general revelation verses. And it says, the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech, night after night they reveal knowledge. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. So after the Reformation, they went to a literal reading of the Bible, and the scientists decided that there is evidence out there, and we can learn more about God by study the created world, and that's what they were doing, trying to find out more about God, his divine nature and eternal power, and they're there, and that's what we're going to do tonight too. That's the second general revelation verse. And it was Colossians 1:16, for by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible. That's what we're going to look for, some invisible tonight. All things were created by him and for him, Colossians 1:16. So science and scripture, in the quest to know God and his creation, we need spiritual as well as scientific humility. In humility, we need to be willing to reevaluate not only scientific dogma, but also theological tradition on issues where the scripture is silent or ambiguous. So just if Christians say it, if the Bible doesn't say it, doesn't mean it's absolute truth. We need to encourage our youth to pursue the sciences while avoiding the fallacies of scientific materialism. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. We must discern between true scientific method and the philosophy of scientific materialism. Scientific materialism is the big problem in the world today. The scientific method by Sir Francis Bacon is based on the inductive reasoning. Inductive means you look at the small parts and then you build the big story from the small parts. And he says hypothesis, experimentation, observation, reproducibility, and conclusion follow the evidence. It rejects deductive reasoning from a priori first principles and assumptions. So deductive is get the big picture and try to support it. Inductive is taking the little bits of evidence and trying to put them all together once you validate them. And that's what the scientific method is, and that's what we're supposed to do. Scientific materialism is not scientific. It rejects inductive science method because it is a deductive philosophy that defines reality based on unproven a priori assumptions Example, there is no God and all reality is material. Some people say materialism is ones who believe in wanting a big house, a big car, and fancy clothes, but we're talking about related to science. And I think they might go hand in hand, but this is a different area that we're talking about tonight. It does the very thing it falsely accused Christians of doing, a priori deductive reasoning. That's what they do. That's not what we do. The fundamental choice, scientific materialism, no one plus nothing times blind chance equals everything. Biblical worldview, a transcendent, omnipotent God created all out of nothing and therefore is sovereign over all. Which takes more faith? What is more scientific, supported by the evidence? Scientific materialism or a God who created all? We can use Occam's razor for that. It's a fundamental principle of science which states that you should always choose the simplest explanation of a phenomenon, i.e. the one that requires the fewest leaps of logic. Which conclusion, based on the evidence, best fits Occam's razor? No one plus nothing times blind chance equals everything, or intelligent design equals everything. Occam's razor in science points to an intelligent designer, supernatural creation, the God of the Bible. Here's a different take on it. What many take to be a conflict between religion and science is really something else. It is a conflict between religion and materialism. Materialism regards itself as scientific and indeed is often called scientific materialism, even by its opponents, but it has no legitimate claim to be part of science. He's got an interesting take on it, and I think he's talking about basic assumptions. We believe in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. They believe in the beginning time plus chance, and that is basically a religious idea. And we believe the evidence points back to a creator God, but the ultimate assumption is a religious one, is what he's saying. Richard Lewettin explains the problem of materialisms. He says, we take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of its failure to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life, in spite of the tolerance of the scientific community for unsubstantiated just so stories. That's silly stories, basically. Because we have a prior commitment, a commitment to materialism, we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. They're closed-minded. They come up with things that are settled science, and they don't want to hear anything else. And that's a big problem holding us back in science today. And here's a question out of all secular professional scientists. You know which group has the highest number of believers in God? Well, the answer is astronomers do. Over 90% of the world's great astronomers believe in God. Why? They studied the heavens. The evidence is there in the heavens. We've got a couple witnesses here just to show you that there is evidence for God in the heavens. And this is William Phillips, Nobel laureate in physics, 1997. I believe in God. In fact, I believe in a personal God who acts and interacts with the creation. I believe that the observations about the orderliness of the physical universe and the apparent exceptional fine-tuning of the conditions of the universe for the development of life suggest an intelligent creator is responsible. I believe in God because of a personal faith, a faith that is consistent with what I know about science. So it is faith, but it's consistent with the evidence. Frank Tipler, he says, when I began my career as a cosmologist some 20 years ago, I was a convinced atheist. I never in my wildest dreams imagined that one day I would be writing a book purporting to show that the central claims of Judeo-Christian theology are in fact true, that these claims are straightforward deductions of the laws of physics as we know and understand them. I have been forced into these conclusions by the inexorable logic of my own special branch of physics. So that's a wonderful testimony, what he learned from the heavens. And so the heavens are amazing, and we're going to look at some of them. But wrong assumptions do lead to wrong conclusions, and that's bad ideas have bad consequences, and that's what I'm going to talk a lot about today. And one in that really has affected cosmology, and that we'll talk about in a second. But this is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data, and simply one twists the facts to suit their theories instead of theories to suit their facts. So one assumption is what caused the Big Bang? Was there a Big Bang? They don't talk about what caused it. Well, if you have anything, you got to figure out what caused it before you start talking about it, but they don't have it. And I think the evidence just isn't there. And in an open letter published in New Science magazine on May 22, 2004, more than 350 engineers and scientists described their concern about the Standard Model. In part, the letter read, "The Big Bang today relies on a growing number of hypothetical entities, things that have never been observed. Inflation, dark matter, and dark energy are the most prominent examples. Without them, there would be a fatal contradiction between the observations made by the astronomers and the predictions of the Big Bang theory. In no other field of physics would this continual recourse to new hypothetical objects be accepted as a way of bridging the gap between theory and observation. It would at the least raise serious questions about the validity of the underlying theory." See, they have this bad assumptions. There's evidence that just isn't there, and they have to make up these just so stories to try to bridge the gaps, and they just don't change their story because they don't want a divine foot in the door. The next big assumption is gravity. And Isaac Newton had this, and he had limited scientific knowledge, and he came up with the idea of mass being attracted by mass. And this was 400 some years ago. And he was describing something that is real, but I think he was wrong, and we stuck with that assumption ever since. And as a result of that assumption, we think that gravity works by mass being attracted to mass. They tried to do it with experiments, try to validate it in some way. It just doesn't work in the real world. But what we see is real. What causes it is something else. This is a August 2, 2019 Washington Post article. We'll just read part of it. "Everything you thought you knew about gravity is wrong. What you think you know is a series of illusions." Well, we don't know what gravity is. This is from the article. Say that to the average person, and the answer you'll probably get is some version of what you are talking about. Gravity is the force of attraction that makes things fall straight down. And that's what people think. And people think you're crazy if you ask what is gravity, but ask that to a physicist and you'll get the answer is, that's right. We don't know what gravity is. It's a big problem. And what causes it, we'll talk about a little bit later. That's Richard Planek in the article, Solving the Mysteries Beneath Our Feet. So Einstein's idea, E equals mc squared, we talked about it last week. It was wrong. I think it might be wrong too. And I think it's backwards. Matter comes from energy, not energy from matter. And that idea came from the original assumption of gravity in an article that recently popped up, May 27, 2021. Dark matter findings suggest Einstein's theory of relativity may be wrong. This was BBC News, just recently came out. Einstein's idea, he just came up with a mathematical equation. He got the C2 from somebody else and thought that would look good and tried to validate that energy could come from mass, but it just isn't so. Nikola Tesla says today's scientists have substitute mathematics for experiments, and they wander off through equation after equation, eventually build a structure where it has no relation to reality. So another big question, what is energy? Where does it come? Where does it come from matter? No, it doesn't come from matter. What is energy? It's a problem. It's important to realize that in physics today, we have no knowledge of what energy is. We do not have a picture that energy comes in little blobs of definite amount, of a definite amount. They don't know what energy is. We know how to use it. We can produce it. We can make generators that keep producing it for decades. And why does it produce it? And what is actually is? People don't talk about it, but we don't know what energy is. And I think that there's really uh, uh, a lot we could learn, but I think it points to a divine source energy, because we know from the first law of thermodynamics that energy cannot be created or destroyed. So it had to come from a divine source. All energy comes from that. Look a little bit of how stars form. We're not going to go into detail, but this cloud of hydrogen and helium come together, and they keep getting bigger and bigger, and the gravity causes fusion to happen inside, and slowly the stars will get stable, and they'll become a big star. Well, it just doesn't work in reality. Clouds of gas don't compress together. They don't clump together. They just blow around. And this is just another just so story. Try to explain it. The process, evolution's various assumptions, even novatry, the process by which an interstellar cloud is concentrated until it's held together gravitationally to become a protostar is not known. Here's another quote from Martin Harwin. Literally hundreds of ideas on how stars are formed have been advanced in past decades. However, we are still far from any real solution. Charles Labadie. The origin of stars represents one of the most fundamental unsolved problems of contemporary astrophysics. Roger Withorst. Nobody really understands how star formation proceeds. It's really remarkable. We've never seen one form, actually. And E.T. Young, it might seem that star formation is a problem that has been solved, but nothing could be further from the truth. The birth of stars remains one of the most vibrant topics in astrophysics today. So they don't know how stars form. They've never seen one form. They say we see a cloud and then stars pop up. No, that isn't seeing a star form. They don't have the slightest idea of how they form. What is the source of the sun's light and energy? In the past, they thought it was a god or maybe a pile of sticks or coal. And the gravitational collapse theory came, and it's a compression of solar gases by gravity. Scientists calculated the sun could be expected to last up to 20 million years with this model. Once again, looking at gravity as the cause of the energy once again. And actually, the NASA has classified a couple of stars as being powered by gravitational collapse because they consider them too small to be powered by internal fusion. The next system, by the late 19th century, however, geologists were confident that Earth was much older than the astronomers' model could allow, and the conflict began between astronomy and geology continued for several decades, and they were desperately looking for a model that could explain how it could be billions of years old. Around 1940, nuclear fusion furnace was thought to be responsible for powering stars, and for decades now, cosmologists, astronomers, and astrophysicists has accepted the basic concept as fact, even settled science. They're not open to new ideas. So how do they claim fusion works? The sun's core is a natural fusion reaction. Before the sun was formed, it was a cloud of gas mostly made up of hydrogen, some helium. At some point, the cloud became so massive that gravity caused it to collapse on itself and form a star. Numerous collisions in the core of the sun feed electrons from ions, forming plasma state. Fusion begins in the sun when collisions between ions become so frequent that the ions got close enough to fuse together. The sun uses gravity to get its nuclei close enough and hot enough to start fusion. On Earth, researchers are trying to build fusion reactors of their own. They try to get atoms close enough by maximizing the number of ions in a small region and the amount of time they stay close together. In order to do this, reactors get heated to temperatures much hotter than the core of the sun, 100 million degrees centigrade, at which converts hydrogen gas into hydrogen plasma. A strong magnetic field or high-powered lasers then confine the plasma in a small controllable region where fusion can happen. They do fusion, but they do all these things. It doesn't happen by chance. And I don't think it could ever happen. And the amount of energy they use to create fusion is more than they produce. So problems with it. Critics, however, point that the temperature given by standard gas laws are not sufficient to provoke nuclear fusion. They cite the Coulomb barrier. In this case, the electric repulsion between two protons or like charges. Once the protons are fused, they could be held together by a strong nuclear force, but that force dominates only at a short distance. To achieve fusion, it would be necessary for protons to cross a barrier of the repulsive electric force, which is sufficient to keep the protons apart forever. But Eddington's successors accomplished the impossible by something called quantum tunneling, enabling an extremely small percentage of protons to simply appear inside the barrier at any particular time. Scientists found that in order for atoms to fuse, they must be a stable and relatively low temperature, but when fusion begins, the temperatures rise and process halts because hydrogen and helium are not stable at high temperatures. In other words, fusion does not commence at high temperatures, and fusion chain reaction does not continue in these conditions. Thus, it's hard to comprehend how fusion could continuously be occurring inside the sun. It goes against the evidence. Advocates of the nuclear furnace made a series of fundamental assumptions common to astronomy long before the emergence of a nuclear model of the sun. Credibility of the assumptions was not an issue to them. They assumed that diffuse clouds of gas in space would collapse gravitationally into star-sized bodies. That's just never going to happen. They assumed that the sun's mass could be calculated simply by the orbital motions of the planet. And that's, once again, a bad assumption. When they look at other stars, they try to figure out the mass doing the same thing. They just don't know what the mass is because it's based on gravity assumption. They assume that Newtonian calculations of mass coupled with the standard gas laws enable them to determine the pressure and temperatures of the sun's core. Another assumption common to astronomy in their time, that the sun and planets are electrically neutral. They gave no consideration to the role of electricity, no consideration to the role of magnetic fields that electric currents generate. So those are the bad assumptions. So I corresponded with noted solar astrophysicist Dr. C. Anthony Young of the Goddard Space Flight Center, who runs the website about the sun. I asked him, what is the best evidence that internal fusion is the power source for the sun? He replied, the best evidence is that the Earth is so old. If that's good evidence for you, it's not good evidence for me. Another thing that we found out, that there is a corona. And you can't have a corona without electricity, without a magnetic field. And you don't have that kind of magnetic field with internal fusion, but also the Ulysses spacecraft detected a reverse temperature gradient on the sun. The higher the temperatures found in the corona than on the surface. Temperatures 310 miles above the visible solar surface was determined to be 4,400 K, the coolest temperature observed. At top of the chromosphere, that's in the chromosphere, that's in the corona, 1,200 miles above the sun's surface, the temperature measured at approximately 20,000 Ks. Further out in the corona, the temperature rose to a high of 2 million K. So the surface temperature is also 6,000 K. And so it just doesn't add up that the source of power is coming from the sun, actual sun. It's all coming from the corona. And if internal fusion is coming, there shouldn't be a corona. And so this is a recent article, came out today actually. Astronomers confirmed the existence of magnetic waves in the sun's photosphere. For the first time, astronomers have observed waves of magnetic energy known as Alphen waves in the photosphere of the sun. This discovery may help explain why the solar corona is so much hotter than the surface. The sun is made of plasma, and like any plasma, it should support Alphen waves. These are waves in plasma that ion move in response to tension from the magnetic field. Predicted over 50 years ago, astronomers until now have been unable to see them in the sun, but recent observations of the sun's photosphere, the lowest layer of its atmosphere, and the region that releases the light that we can see, finally found them. So this is recent, and there's magnetic stuff going on in the sun. Now I want to look a little bit at the electric universe model. And this is that holds that the universe is full of plasma, and it's all connected. And this was an idea that was around for a long time. Actually, Isaac Newton believed it had to be true for his theory to be true, even though he had the mass between mass idea. And just the electric universe is a totally different assumption and gives you a different view of everything. So we'll talk a little bit about what is plasma. Plasma is looked upon as the fourth state of matter. Some say the first state of matter, different from solid, liquid, gas, and as plasma is almost exclusively electromagnetic, a cluster of ionized particles. Electrical theory is being unwrapped from the closet and is given another airing. I think that's why we're finding out so many things, because people are starting to realize there's more to the universe. So what does this mean? In a plasma, some electrons are freed from their atoms, allowing the current and electricity to flow. In fact, one of the few naturally occurring plasmas found on Earth is lightning. Plasmas in three different modes. There's the glow mode, which are neon signs, the aurora, and glowing in the universe. And there's welder, arc, and lightning, and on the sun, the different loops that are on the sun are all in glow mode plasma, or arc mode plasma. The plasma that's in the corona is in the glow mode. The plasma in the universe is in the normal dark mode. They don't understand how it got dark because it's never in that mode that we see it, but that's what it is in the universe. In 1999, NASA scientists reported that based on various observational studies, as estimated 99.9% of the universe was made up of plasma, rarefied ionized gas. Dr. Gallagher, plasma physicist at National Marshall Space Flight Center, 99% of the universe is made up of plasma. Very little of matter in space is made out of rock like Earth. So I believe on day one, God created, he said, let there be light. He filled the universe with plasma. And in verse 26 of chapter 1, he made it out of pre-existing material, and he made it out of the light that he made on day one. And the universe still remains filled with this light. A few people are coming around on board. NASA, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the European Operational for Nuclear Research, and the Los Alamos National Laboratory have all switched from traditional space theory to a more generally accepted and more familiar electromagnetically driven plasma physics, whose founding father, Swedish Nobel laureate Hans Alfvén, you got the name Alfvén, coined the phrase plasma universe. They're coming around to this idea, and we're getting all kinds of new information. You wouldn't believe it. I'm going to show you a lot of stuff that's just come out in the last month. Problem for the materialists, how did it get there? It takes a ton of energy just to make plasma. If I were to just take a teaspoon of salt and say, make this into plasma. You'd have to have a ton of energy to turn that little amount into into plasma. But to get the whole universe full of plasma is unthinkable for the materialists. But with us, with an infinite, unimaginable God, it's no problem. It could change the speed of light. Not a problem for us. Big problem for them. They have all kinds of assumptions that are based on this gravitational model, and billions of years and everything is all based on their estimation of the speed of light. Another problem is the Michelson and Morley 1887 experiment. They figured out that the universe wasn't full of plasma, and it was declared settled science at the time by the materialists. So here's from May 10, 2021. In the emptiness of space, Voyager 1 detects plasma Hume from more than 14 billion miles away. Launched in September 1977, Voyager 1 spacecraft flew by Jupiter in 1979 and Saturn in 1980, traveled about 38,000 miles per hour. Voyager crossed the Heliops in August 2012. That's the end of the solar wind. After entering interstellar space, the spacecraft's plasma wave system detected perturbations in the gas. But in between those eruptions caused by our rolling sun, researchers have uncovered a steady, persistent signature produced by the tenuous near vacuum of space. They keep encountering plasma. The interstellar medium is like a quiet or gentle rain, said senior author John Corners. In case of a solar outburst, it's like detecting a lightning burst in a thunderstorm. Then it goes back to a gentle rain. And Octor believes there is more low-level activity in the interstellar gas than scientists have previously thought, which allows researchers to track spatial distribution of plasma, that is, when it's not being perturbed by solar flares. So gravity revealed as electromagnetic force. And this is a different look at gravity, and it's kind of long. Let me read it to you. This is the electric universe, guys. I think it might still have some problems, but I think it's a good theory. The Earth is fundamentally protons, electrons, neurons. The force of gravity on Earth could simply be a phenomenon of those elements, lacking any analysis, demonstrating how electric charge forces of protons and electrons, both repulsive and attractive, can give rise to gravitational force so much weaker than only attractive. Here, application of Coulomb's law of energy charges show that the force of gravity derived from basic proton-electron charge force. Separation of electrons from protons within any atom results in infinitesimal force imbalances, either repulsive or attractive, with every external proton-electron pair. When such forces imbalances are complemented using a Monte Carlo probability simulation for all charge pairs in a large mass like the Earth, repulsive forces are shown to never entirely cancel attractive force, and a weak net attractive force always remains. Coulomb's law yields the same force between Earth and the object as its surface as Newton's law of gravity proposed, confirming that gravity is an electromagnetic force and it's not a unique force of its own. This research is a mathematical analysis and application of basic scientific principles, much like the computer modeling of a complex engineering system. This is kind of the just the beginning of this paper on this, but you get an idea of basically what they think gravity is from. And while it could be from a magnetic electrical force, I think this sounds much more reasonable. It has been done with no need for new theories, new speculation, abstract reasoning, nor abstract mathematics. The speed of light, there's probably a different speed on Earth than there is in the heavens. On Earth, we bounce it off mirrors that could expect it. And Nikola Tesla talked about speed of light in the universe. I consider this extremely important. Light cannot be anything but a longitudinal disturbance in the ether involving alternative refractions and compressions. In other words, light can be nothing else than a sound wave in ether. Radio transmitters emit nothing else but sound waves in ether. Sound does not travel as the speed, neither does light. Sound assumes the speed of disturbance of the medium it is traveling through or rate of induction. Both the speed of sound and light are rates of induction of its own disturbance and perturbation. Light is not a particle, it's a perturbation of a field. Big problem with the speed of light. How can it be 14 billion years old and you can see things 92 billion light years away? They have a problem with it. And they say we have a problem, well, they have a problem too. Interesting. This came out May 21st, 2021. Physicists have broken the speed of light with pulses inside hot plasma. And they're starting to look into it and proving Tesla's right and that there's a big problem with the light speed problem. Since the presence of plasma in the universe points directly to a creator and a creation, cosmologists resist the model of the electric sun and electric universe in spite of scientifically driven evidence. Here's a quote from Dave Talbot and Walt Thornhill. Today, nothing is more important to the future and credibility of science than the liberation from the gravity-driven universe of a priori theory. A mistaken substitution has not only prevented intelligent and sincere investigators from seeing what would otherwise be obvious, it has bred indifference to the possibilities that could have inspired scientists for decades. So they're saying that materialism is holding them back and the ideas should be opening up, and they are opening up as I showed you. Ralph Jurgens further refined the electric universe model and concluded the sun was a positively charged object at the center of the electric plasmic field across the universe. He stated, the modern astrophysical concept that ascribes the sun energy to thermonuclear reactions deep in the solar interior is contradicted by nearly every observable aspect of the sun. Jurgens suggests that the source of the sun's glow might be a coronal glow discharge fed by galactic plasma currents. Thus, he was the first to suggest there was an external power source to the sun. The known characteristics of interplanetary meeting suggest that not only that the sun and the planets are electrically charged, but the sun itself is a focus of cosmic electrical discharge, the probable source of all radiant energy. It is interesting to note that the calculated energy density of the cosmic rays of our galaxy is comparable to the total energy density of the electromagnetic radiation, including starlight, which is one would expect if the case of the stars were electricity was responsible. So I want to look at a few things strange things have been going on in the universe. There's solar flares. The cosmos holding the standard model of the sun could not explain four enormous solar flares that erupted from sunspot 720 on January 2005 and on 20th. Another huge explosion occurred, producing a super coronal mass ejection with escape velocities never before observed. Normally, it takes more than 24 hours for a shock wave protons from such an explosion to reach the Earth. In this case, it arrived just 30 minutes after the event. The wave continued to accelerate past the Earth. So this points to an electrical explosion from the sun, basically. August 1, 2010, There was enormous shock waves again from a solar explosion, and the NASA analysis event included these comments. The U.S. Space Agency now admits the cataclysm put existing solar theories in doubt. We are forever being told that the sun is a vast ball of hydrogen and helium at the center of our solar system, but new evidence may help prove that this isn't the case at all, according to solar experts who say the sun has an iron core. A stunned NASA admits astronomers knew they had witnessed something big. It may shatter old ideas about solar activity. They're saying that the sun is magnetic, basically, and they need to rethink it, but no, they didn't want to rethink it. Alfred Hines explains the blast in the Standard Model, how these particles are driven to their fantastic energy, sometimes as high as 1,000,000 billion electron volts, is one of the prime puzzles of astronomy. No known or even unknown nuclear reaction could account for the firing of particles at such energy. Even the completed annihilation of a proton would not yield more than 1 billion electrovolts. He's saying, we don't know how it's going to happen. It's impossible. Sunspots, they're a big problem. The very existence of sunspots is intriguing. They should be heated quickly from the sides and disappear. They should never have formed, but they do form. Their behavior is so strange that there is still argument between scientists as to why they are there at all. One of the greatest mysteries of the suns is the sunspot cycle. It is intimately associated with other great puzzles, the sun's magnetic field. This puzzle is that it is extremely difficult to conjure a magnetic field from inside a hot ball of conducting plasma, particularly when the solar magnetic field shows amazing complexity and often rapid variability. Galaxies, I personally think galaxies aren't what they say they are. I think there's something else. I don't think they're that far out there. I don't think they're that big. I think they're relatively small compared to what they think they are, and they're within the Milky Way, and we're seeing some strange things about galaxies here that might prove me right. But how galaxies form, here's a book on galaxy formation and evolution. They have weasel words, 2,383, and all these words you can see here, how many times they're used, and assumption, and problems, and they don't know how galaxies form. Here's March 21, 2020. Astronomers witnessed most energetic outflow ever witnessed in the universe, blistering radiation from an active black hole. Sun pulls immense amounts of mechanical energy through space. Using the unique capabilities of NASA's Hubble Space Telescope, astronomers observed the most energetic outflow ever released from quasars and tear across the interstellar space like tsunami, unleashing havoc on galaxies in which the quasars live. Principals, investigators, no other phenomenon carries more mechanical energy over the lifetime of 10 million years. These outflows produce 1 million times more energy than the gamma ray bursts. The winds are pushing hundreds of solar masses of material each year. The amount of mechanical energy that outflows carrying is up to several hundred times higher than the luminosity of the entire Milky Way galaxy. They're assuming that they're that big, and I don't think they're that big, and it's not really that amount of energy, but they see a lot of these big things going on. This is a recent headline, Space. Within months, 6 quiet galaxies became blazing quasars, and science don't know how. Galaxies became quasars, and they don't say, but they've switched back and forth, some of them. And there's a lot of strange things going on about galaxies, and just doesn't make sense if they're 100,000 light years across or whatever. That was September 19, 2019. Ancient quasars in distant galaxies caught switching on suddenly. The real supplies in timescale. Previously, astronomers thought it would take thousands to millions of years to funnel enough gas onto a supermassive black hole for it to spawn a quasar. It definitely shouldn't take less than 10. This is a bit of embarrassing moment for black hole and quasar scientists, says Eric of Harvard University. The conventional wisdom was found to be dramatically wrong. There's whole things going on. I think black holes are actually, we'll talk about it, they're actually Birkeland currents. How old is the sun? Is a quote from John Eddy. I suspect that the sun is 4.5 billion years old. However, given some new and unexpected results to the contrary and some time for some frantic recalculation, theoretical readjustments, I suspect that we could live with Bishop Usher's value for the age of the Earth and the Sun about 6,000 years. I don't think there is much in way of observational evidence to conflict with that. He says the evidence points to it not being that old, and there's no evidence that it is that old. Another interesting piece of evidence that nobody talks about, the shrinking sun. In 1980, there was headlines, and it said since 1836, over 100 different observers at Royal Greenwich Observatory and the U.S. Naval Observatory made direct visual measurements which show that the diameter of the sun is shrinking at a rate of 0.1% each century, or about 5 feet per hour. Furthermore, records of the solar eclipse infer that this rapid shrinkage has been going on for the past 400 years. Scientists weren't happy about that. They scrambled to disprove and discredited the shrinking sun observation and conclusions. They questioned the accuracy of the measurements, attacked the professional expertise of the researchers. The experts even suggest that the researchers were predisposed toward creation model when forming their conclusions. And all they did is attack the messenger. In 1980, a big hero rose. He got a Nobel Prize for this. Erwin Shapiro published a critique of the shrinking sun theory based on analysis of the relationship between the size of Mercury and the sun is measured between the end of the 17th century and 1937. He concluded the proportional sizes of the two were unchanged. He didn't say anything about actually the size changing. And it could be that Mercury is moving closer, but actually I just found out recently that Mercury, they find, is shrinking. And I think I don't think they're going to reopen the shrinking sun idea, because shrinking sun idea is okay for thousands of years, but not good for hundreds of thousands of years, even not even 100,000 years. In 1990, Professor Lei, a research fellow at Shanghai Observatory, using solar measurements taken in his country from 1715 to 1987, they calculated the sun had shrunk 410 kilometers during that period, an average of 1.5 kilometers each year, or 5 feet per hour. I think there's evidence that the sun isn't that old. They just don't want to be open to the idea. They can't let a divine foot in the door. I want to talk a little bit about Birkeland currents, and I'll have to try to go a little faster, running out of time. He was a Norwegian scientist. What he thought is, and he did experiments, he died in 1917, but in a plasma semi-vacuum, and he thought that everything was connected in the universe, that the moon, that the Earth was connected, and the Earth was connected to the moon, and all the planets were connected to the sun with these currents. And Birkeland currents, the reason why Birkeland currents are particularly interesting is that the plasma force to carry them, they cause a number of physical processes to occur, waves, instabilities, fine structure formation. These in turn lead to consequences as accelerated charge particles, both positive, negative, and element separated, like preferential ejection of oxygen ions. Both classes of phenomenon should be general astrophysical interests far beyond the understanding of space environment of our own Earth. So if there's these Birkeland currents, there would have to be plasma through the universe. So NASA found out an 8-month-old study unraveled the source of northern light and made startling progress and discovered giant magnetic ropes that connected the Earth to the sun, basically. And this is a Birkeland current. They don't call it a Birkeland current, but it's connected. They found that there was these ropes all the way out to Saturn from the sun. That's 900 million miles away. And how did those currents get connected? And when they get connected, it's a big problem for the materialists. And this is Aurora on Jupiter, a magnetic connection with the sun and the Messianic moons. This was an article that talked about that the sun is connected to the Jupiter also. And there's threads through galactic tapestry. This is May 27th. Threads of superheated gas and magnetic fields are weaving tapestry of energy in the center of the Milky Way galaxy. A new image of this cosmic masterpiece was made using a giant mosaic of data from NASA's X-ray Observatory and the radio telescope in South Africa. So you see there, that's amazing. If you look at that picture down below, that's what they came up, that's coming out of the center. And I believe the center is fueling our suns and all the stars in our galaxy. There's 10 times the gamma rays were detected coming from the Earth, and much higher than thought possible in our galaxy. And this is from the center of the Milky Way. Again, it's May 23, 2021. There's finding all these things now that they're open their eyes. And far reaches of cosmic web galaxies seem to be communicating with each other across vast distances, never thought possible before, putting cosmological principle into question again. And this was 2019. So we think that the sun's connected. It's amazing. And all these currents are coming from the sun. We think the sun gets its current from the center of the universe, where they think there's a black hole, when actually it's a huge current source in the center of our galaxy. And our sun is amazing. And this energy that it puts out is really something that cannot be explained with the materialist idea. Black holes are a problem. Electric plasmic universe model holds that black holes are a result of powerful electrical discharge effects at the center of galactic plasma electrical flows. The result, electrical forces exponentially stronger than gravity can readily account for gravity-like effects on passing stars. Dr. Scott says this is how this has become a religion. It's how sacrosanct belief that the black holes exist regardless of the fact that none has ever been observed, and that simpler plasma-based explanations are readily abandoned. So where do the black holes lead? Where do they get their power from? That's the big question. And I think the creator God of the universe has the answer for that. And I think the evidence to a creator God is overwhelming. And I promised I'd talk a little bit about UFOs in the last minute. Well, I guess I got 5 minutes. So anyway, what are UFOs? There's going to be a big report that's coming out this month about UFOs. So I want to talk a little bit about UFOs. UFOs mean unidentified flying objects. And just anything that's out there that you can't identify is a UFO. But what are the possibilities of these UFOs we're going to be talking about? Could be top secret military aircraft, maybe from another country. Could be something like that. When you see the pictures, look at that as a possibility. Man-made flying object could be something that somebody put up and trying to scare people or something. The third option, aliens from another planet. And that is what a lot of people would like. The materialists would love to be their alien because it shows that life can come from non-life, and superior life could develop from from non-life, but even if it was aliens, they'd still have to figure out how that life came from. But knowing how far the nearest star is, nobody's coming here from another star to check us out. And a natural explanation I want to give you, a possible, especially after we talked about all the plasma universe, a different one that recently I read an article about, but it says that basically UFOs fire in the sky. This is the article, UFOs from Volcano, and this is by Egon W. Bach was the story, and I'm going to show you a few pictures of what they talk about, and they say that it comes from volcanoes. It could come from something else, but they're actually plasmoids is what they call them, that pop out of the pressure of the volcano, and there are these balls and areas of plasmoids that fly out. Here's the electromagnetic plasmoids. Here's a picture of it coming out from a volcano. Here's another one. Captain Richard Swan, he saw the volcano in Alaska, Mount Redoubt, and he gave a great explanation of what he saw, and I think this gives us great insight. He said he saw the beginning of the eruption. As in many of the volcanic reports in the book, there was first a brilliant light with massive electrical displays and emissions of huge number of plasmoids, suggesting that in the transmutation apparatus, the phenomena is basically electrical and magnetic, but electricity and magnetism is not understood by quantum paradigm physics. And so this is what this book is saying, that they're not open to the idea. That's why they're not looking for these things, basically. He goes on to say, to quote the captain, he says, the top of Redoubt lit up with an incredible bright flash. It seemed the Cook Inlet and mountains behind it lit up in daytime brightness. A fireball grew above Redoubt with huge tongues-like projections, quite unlike the concentric fireball of nuclear explosions. I saw a huge object shooting up resembling Roman candles. They flew in two directions, Homer and Anchorage, that's north and south. The objects were completely unlike lightning. They probably did zoom out of the crater, 5 or 6 balls at a given moment, followed by another barrage in short order. They had such distorted shapes and flew with such incredible rapidity that they almost looked like fleeting reflections. They quickly streaked out from the center field of sight. Most of these rocketing objects were yellowish white and immensely bright. Others were of the most vivid, brilliant blue anyone could ever find, as if a blue cellophane strip was lit from behind by a 500-watt light bulb. Still others were of a most vivid emerald green that also was immensely bright. These red objects bordered in their colors on purplish and fiery red. There were infinity of shadowing to the main colors. There was several kinds of blue, some on the verge of violet. So we know it comes from there. They think it might come from somehow from water, maybe volcanoes below. And these plasmoids float in the universe, and they can last for a long time. And that's why they float around for a long time. And also, there's going to be a picture of one that follow a U.S. aircraft. These plasmoids seem to travel along magnetic lines towards the poles, but are attracted to heat sources such as the sun, or follow a airplane exhaust, or look for other heat sources. So they can go, and they can go at super amazing speeds, and they can stop instantly and switch directions, and they can do things that normal airplanes can't do. And so we'll see what they say. Also, UFO spotted in Japan. Maybe they're heading towards this power plant, and these again look like plasmoids. And so when you see the pictures, you'll have a different idea and see whether you think they might be plasmoids or what you think is involved. So that's my presentation on UFOs. And anyway, you can't explain the universe without God. Hawkins tries to say it can be created by gravity, but we know gravity isn't what it is. And so the evidence points to there being a creator God, and the evidence is amazing. So let me stop the recording here now, hopefully. And